Board meeting Thursday, July 21st, 2022. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 7th, 2022, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on applications once the chairman opens the hearing up to the members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature and we will bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai has been excused. Mr. Cristiano has been excused. Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Greenfield?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Here.
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Councilman Bonovich? I have not heard from. Mr. Spanville?
Here.
Ms. Talente?
Here.
And Chairman Tannenhouse?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Could everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for all of our first responders and those serving both here and abroad. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have an approval of minutes, regular meeting, April 28th, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Mr. Castro, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Spanville, and Ms. Talente. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. I have a second.
Second.
Appreciate it. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado?
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. Husser?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Spanville?
Yes.
Ms. Talente?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Motion carries.
And Mr. Cristiano is not here, right?
Correct.
All right. Special meeting, May 5th, 2022. Eligible voters are Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Nicastro, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talente, and myself. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of May 5th, 2022.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
Mr. Spanville?
Yes.
Talente?
Yes.
And Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Motion carries.
A regular meeting, May 12th, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Ms. Talente. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado?
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yes.
And Ms. Talente?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. We have regular meeting, June 2nd, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Nicastro, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talente, and myself. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Greenfield?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Spanville?
Yes.
Ms. Talente?
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Any vouchers?
No vouchers.
Correspondence?
I do have correspondence. I have a letter from Mr. Pape. He is the attorney for 90 Industrial Court, which is on tonight's agenda. He has asked that the board consider this letter to be a request to continue this application to August 4th without the requirement of renotice or republication, and they will be prepared to proceed before the board on that evening.
Did they need an extension of time?
I don't believe so. No, they're good till September 30th.
Okay, thank you. Any more?
Do we want to carry that first?
Sure.
Question for Eileen and the chair. As of August 4th, are the meetings going back live?
Not
Or
yet,
is it, they're still going to be Zoom?
Yes.
As far as
Okay.
I know, yes.
Okay, I just wanted, if Chairman, if you'd like me to make the announcement, I just wanted to make it accurately.
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right, if anybody's here interested in case number SP 1098, 90 Industrial Court LLC, which was a preliminary and final major site plan application with variances and waivers, the applicant has asked that it be carried on notice to the board's regularly scheduled meeting for August 4th, 2022 at 7 p.m., which will be a remote meeting as this evening. It will not be heard this evening. There will not be any further mailed notice. So
Thank you.
being carried.
Thank you. I also want to let the members know that the IT department sent out an email to all the board members, all the employees, anyone who has a township email address, that they are going to a 10-character password minimum. And they've asked me to please let all the boards know that you need to log into your township email account and change it. It needs to be at least 10 characters, has to have an uppercase, lowercase letter, a number, and a symbol. And the good news is, if you had to change it every 3 months because of a password reset or change, that will go away with this here 10-digit password. So please do that as soon as possible. The next thing is 6 or 7. I think we sent 7 ordinances out for the board to review. We need to comment on consistency. I think one of them is not actually a land use ordinance, so we don't have to do that one, but there are 7 and they are up for adoption by the council on August 16th. So we either have to comment tonight or August 4th, but the sooner the better.
Oh, I was able to go through them before the meeting, so it's up to the board. Has everybody else been able to get through them?
I did.
Okay. And are you talking about the hazardous waste one, Eileen?
Yes, that really is not a land use one for the board to acknowledge.
Okay, I would agree. Although I'm sure our environmental liaison probably appreciates that one.
It was a good one.
Okay, Steve, we just want to take them one at a time or take them in bulk? And you're muted. Yep, still muted.
Steve, you're muted.
Does Steve know he's muted?
There he is.
Brian,
Sorry
I
about-
didn't get a chance to look at these. I didn't
Yeah,
get a chance to look at them, so I'm not gonna.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
No worries.
Just go through them one by one, and then I got a note from Ron asking that the board, if during the referral, the recommendations do a separate vote as to each ordinance.
Okay, go ahead.
That's what he asked for that.
So Eileen, you wanna read them in one at a time in order and let you keep track of it, please?
Want me to read them in?
Yeah, we're gonna,
All right, I'm not going to read the whole ordinance, but I will
No,
read what
just-
it's about.
just a number and a title.
Okay, O 2246 is an ordinance amending chapter 188 land use, article 4 standards of performance, subsection 19, entitled air, water, and environmental considerations of general applicability of the revised general ordinances of the township of Howell.
Thank
And
you.
this-
Do I have a motion that this is
Mr. Chairman, I'd like Jen to chime in on this one.
Sarah,
So, I mean, I'm gonna be kind of a redundant message throughout, but, you know, we had like 10 ordinances that went before us a couple meetings ago. these are like 7, that's the balance of what we've been doing from the May 5th master plan. So I would submit that these ordinances, and we can go through them one at a time, but this one in particular, 2246, which, you know, basically identifies requirements for distance for generators, et cetera, is implementation of a recommendation from our master plan that was adopted on May 5th.
Thank you. So do I have a motion that's substantially consistent with the master plan?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Oh, you said he
Abstain.
was gonna abstain.
Yeah, I'm not gonna vote on it.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
I didn't hear you, Rob.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Ordinance number 02247 is an ordinance amending chapter 188 land use, article 10 zones, subsection 65, entitled enumeration of districts of the revised general ordinances of the township of Howell.
Okay, Jen?
So again, out of our May 5th master plan, there was a recommendation for some zoning changes. One was the creation of the SED2 zone, and another was the creation of the HD4 zone. This ordinance just identifies them as zones within the township, so I would submit that it is substantially consistent.
Thank you. Okay. I'll make a motion that the ordinance is substantially consistent with our master plan.
I'll make motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Abstain.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Talente,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Ordinance number 48 is an ordinance of the Township of Howell supplementing Chapter 188, Article 10 zones, supplementing and modifying Section 188-79.1 entitled Special Economic Development 1 or SED 1 zone.
You're muted, Jen.
Sorry, this really is kind of catching an error. It is consistent with the master plan. What was absent from the ordinance when it was originally introduced and adopted was the trade contractor businesses and the landscape businesses as conditional uses in the SED1 zone. So instead of jeopardizing the validity of that process, this ordinance is just rectifying the fact that that was omitted by error. But regardless, it is consistent with the recommendations of our May 5th master plan.
Thank you. No one has any questions. I'll entertain a motion that this ordinance is substantially consistent with our master plan.
so
I'll make-
moved,
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Abstain.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, ordinance number 49 is an ordinance of the Township of Howell changing the zoning of block 230, lot 2 within the Township of Howell to zoning designation Special Economic Development 2 or SED 2 zone.
Thank you. Jen?
So similarly, this ordinance, there was one lot that was mistakenly omitted from the ordinance that was adopted in the last go around, block 230, lot 2, basically changing it from SED to SED2. Totally consistent with the recommendations that you guys made in the May 5th master plan. So I would submit that it's substantially consistent.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion that the ordinance is substantially consistent with our master plan.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Abstain.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Ordinance number 50 is an ordinance amending Chapter 188 Land Use, Article 12, Standards and Procedures for Site Plan Review, Section 107, Subsection C, entitled Minimum Parking Requirements of General Applicability of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Howell.
Thank you.
So this ordinance establishes and rectifies some of the parking standards that we have in our existing ordinance and creates parking standards for some of the uses that we have that don't have parking standards. But this again is implementation of a recommendation of our May 5th master plan. And I would submit that it's substantially consistent.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion that this ordinance is substantially consistent with our master plan.
I'll make motion.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second.
roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Abstain.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Ordinance number 51 is an ordinance amending Chapter 188 Land Use, Attachment 1, Schedule 1, entitled Permitted Uses, Non-Residential Zones of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Howell.
So this is really, I would submit it's consistent with what the recommendations are. It's cleanup. So, as you know, we have these tables at the end of our master plan that show what's allowed, what's not allowed. So this is really cleaning up that table based upon the recommendations that we made in the master plan. So I would submit that it's substantially consistent.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion that this is substantially consistent with our master plan.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
second,
thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Abstain.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. And the last one was the one regarding hazardous spills. So that is not a land use, so I'm not even going to read it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And that is all I have for correspondence.
All right, let me get back to the agenda here for a second. I guess we got resolutions, right?
Yes.
Brian, before we get into this, can I ask a question? I don't know if it's the right time for it, with Steve on board. We don't have a member of town council on the planning board right now. Can we get an update on this?
I don't know, is it our place, to be bothered, or that's meant to be done at the council level? We're only appointed.
I understand that, but there should be a member of planning board, like a member of planning board from the council, correct?
Would be nice.
Yes, the class 3 member is a councilman. Yeah.
Okay, so does that affect us in any of our decisions?
No, as long as you have a quorum, you're fine. It's just you don't have a full board.
Okay.
And Ron will be joining in a little bit later. Perhaps he could chime in on that because he's more of an expert on all those types of issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Resolution case number SP-1101, Alair Road LLC, eligible voters. Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talente, and myself. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
second,
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized.
Case number SD-3001. We have eligible voters, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Nacastro, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talente, and Mr. Husser. Do I have a
Make the
motion?
motion.
Thank you. Second?
Nick, you're not
Second.
eligible. Oh, yes, you are. I'm sorry.
He is.
Yeah, your
I'll
name is
second.
at the end. Sorry.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
yes,
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Mr. Husser.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
Thank you. Case number SD-3000, John Kelly, eligible voters, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Seaman, Ms. Talente, and Mr. Husser. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
You're not eligible, Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second it.
Thank
was
you,
that?
Mr. Dorado.
Dorado, thank you. Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
yes,
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Mr. Husser.
Yes.
Motion carries, resolutions memorialized. Thank you. I have nothing else.
Okay, submission waivers.
No submission waivers.
Application before the board is case number SP-1099, Monmouth Solar 1 LLC. Eligible voters, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Ms. Talente, and myself. Is there anybody else that is certified?
I have certified.
I'm certified too.
Thank you.
So hold on, that's Mr. Husser, Mr. Nacastro, and I think I missed somebody. Who else certified? Just those two?
I think just those two.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have the attorney, Grace Chun is in the audience.
All right, Ms. John, your floor is yours.
You're muted though, Grace. Thank you.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that my engineer has been brought in. And
That's-
yep, okay. Perfect. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board, board professionals. Again, my name is Grace Chun of the law firm of Perlman and Miranda. Our office represents the applicant, Monmouth Solar 1 LLC. Just as a recap from the last time that we were here, we are seeking major site plan approval for a solar project on the closed landfill owned by the County of Monmouth. We were initially scheduled to present the application on April 28th. We were carried to May 12th, and it was at the May 12th hearing that the board heard from our engineer, our environmental consultant, and our planner. Questions were then raised regarding the project's compliance, specifically with respect to the township's buffer ordinance. And I believe we're now here on that narrow issue. At the May hearing, the board planner asked some really good questions with respect to the buffer, and we went back, we did our homework, we spoke with the DEP, we got documents from the DEP, and I believe we can continue to have jurisdiction in this matter. So I think I'd just like to start tonight.
Grace, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
You, but Ron Kuchara, he is now being let in.
Okay.
I was just filling in for Ron for a few, I really apologize for interrupting you.
No, not a problem.
As soon as Ron is fully on, I will bow out. And there's Ron. So good night, everybody. It was great seeing you.
Good night.
Thanks, Steve.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
summer.
Yes, Steve.
I was gonna say, before I bring on my engineer, who's gonna discuss some of the DEP plans that we received from the DEP with respect to the site, I just wanted to start off tonight with explaining some of the history of the site and the exceptional circumstances that I believe exist that are unique to this site, in that it is a closed landfill that is currently being monitored by the DEP, and the limitations that we've since discovered as it pertains to our ability, or I should say our inability to make certain changes to the project, and specifically addressing the buffer. I'm going to attempt to be very brief here. So just by way of background, as you know, the property that this project is being proposed is a property owned by the County of Monmouth. It is the site of a former landfill that began operations in 1946. It was officially closed in 1996 through a very lengthy process, application review and approval that went through the DEP. The DEP regulations actually require a closure plan to be submitted in order for the site to be closed. And it also required the submission of engineering design plans for the site's closure. This is because the DEP requires certain specific site features to be installed and maintained during the length of the landfill's closure. I will be bringing back, like I said, our engineer who is going to go over those DEP plans for you. But this background is just for the board, just so you understand and just so that I can make the record clear, the legal backdrop with respect to the site and the regulations that govern the site and the DEP side of things, which will help color why we're proposing what we're proposing. So like I said, the landfill was closed in 96. It is currently under the DEP's post-closure care period. And that just basically means that it's still under the DEP's watch, so to speak, with respect to activities that occur on the closed landfill. And part of the DEP's oversight includes making sure the landfill is maintained and monitored according with the approved engineering design plans that the DEP approved. Part of the relevant DEP regulations that are applicable here to this site and our project are that an access road needs to be around the working face of the landfill. So it can't be on top of the landfill, it has to be around it. The access road also has to be maintained throughout the post-closure period. The landfill has to be secured by a 6-foot chain link fence with an entrance gate, and the closed landfill has to be maintained in accordance with that approved closure plan and the approved engineering design plans. I don't know if the board needs specific sites, but all of this is in the New Jersey Administrative Code, Title 7, Chapter 26.
Ms. Chun, if I can interrupt, is
Sure.
it under the NJDEP or is it under LSRP purview?
No, it was NJDEP. This landfill was closed in 1996.
Okay.
So if I could just cut through it,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So the big issue was they need a buffer, they need relief from the buffer on the one side of the landfill where their solar array is for the drive and the fence, correct?
Correct.
That's located within the 50 feet because the adjacent property is residentially zoned. The
Correct.
question was, can it be moved? And there was not a lot of information that we were able to get at the time of the hearing. Since that time, the applicant has gone to the DEP, got the closure information from when the landfill was closed in 96. And it is very clear to me, based upon the information that's been provided, that the location of the road and the location of the fence is in accordance with the closure plan and cannot be relocated. As such, I would submit to the board, which is the last remaining hanging item, if that's the correct term, was
correct.
the justification for the relief from the 50-foot buffer. And in my opinion, based upon the information that the applicant has provided, based upon the closure and the cap, and that this is kind of like bipartisan government between the county, the town, the solar information, that I feel like there's adequate information, in my opinion, to substantiate the board acting in granting the relief that's been requested. And that was kind of like the last remaining item for me that was hanging. Just give us the information in order for us to feel that relief is justified, and I feel like the applicant has provided that information. So
Got it,
unless you
Jen.
guys want
Yeah,
additional information,
thank you
I
very
feel
much.
like
Thank you.
that's kind
Got
of
it.
the last remaining item that's open on this application. And if that's to the satisfaction of the board, I would submit that the balance of the information, unless Laura has anything else that she needs to add, that the board can act, in my opinion, affirmatively on the application.
Thank you. Appreciate that summarization.
And just
So-
to
so
confirm, Mr. Chairman, the applicant had completed.
Hold on, Laura. It sounds like Ron wants to say something.
No, go, let Laura go first.
Okay.
I just wanted to just confirm that there were no outstanding engineering items. They had all been previously addressed.
So with that said, Mr. Chairman and council, I mean, if you want to put your engineer up, you can. Certainly, it's your application. But having heard the testimony from our planner and our engineer, we could just open it to the public to see if there's anyone from the public, and we can move to taking a vote.
I think that's fine. You know what, we submitted our exhibits, they're part of the record. Ms. Beam did a perfect representation of everything that we've submitted. I don't think I want to belabor the point, so I'll turn it back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, we can just open it, unless the board has any more questions, we can open it to the public.
Okay, fair enough. Does anybody from the board have any questions? Seeing none, we'll open it to the public. Eileen, can you just let the public know how they can unmute themselves and raise their hand?
Sure. At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public to ask questions or comments on this application. Anyone wishing to do so, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're on the phone, you need to do *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute yourself. You will be sworn in and required to give your name and address, and you do need audio and video if you're testifying. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody want to raise their hand? The time is 7:32 and 45 seconds. Give it about a 30 to 45 second period to see if anybody can raise their hand.
And this is public comment for Monmouth Solar 1 LLC only.
Does anybody raise their hand, Eileen?
No, I have no hands raised.
All right, we'll close the public portion of this meeting. Counselor, would you like to summarize unless anybody on the board has a final question? All right, seeing none. Ms. Chun, you want to summarize?
I'll be very brief. I just want to thank the board for their time and considering this project. I think I said before, this project is being done in conjunction with the county. It's going to ultimately benefit the taxpayers in the township. I think that this will be a beneficial use of the current site, and I hope the board will act favorably.
Thank you.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve.
I second Mr. Nicastro.
What do they get to ask? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Paul, you're on mute.
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Applications approved.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Have a good night.
You too.
Next application is case number SP-1080FA 711 Inc.
Your attorney is Jason Tuvell.
I think Christine Cofone is their planner also.
I don't think she's coming.
Okay.
Jason, is Matt Steckler part of your team too?
Yeah, he's our traffic engineer. I wasn't planning on calling him unless there's any questions, but yes, he's part of our team as well.
Okay. Mr. Duval, it's your floor.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jason Duval, attorney for the applicant. As the board recalls, we were here, I believe over a year ago, where the applicant received preliminary and final major site plan approval, as well as conditional use approval. If the board recalls, one of the conditional use standards at the time that we applied for the application was that we needed to have a driveway on an intersecting street with Route 9 to comply with the conditions of approval. So because of that, the original plan that we had before the board showed driveways on Route 9, Wyckoff Mills Road, and Strickland Road, because we needed to comply with that provision regarding the intersecting street. After we received approval from the board, we permitted our project with the DOT. The DOT in pre-app meetings, which is customary, had given us feedback that the Strickland Road access was acceptable to them. However, when we went through the formal permitting process, the DOT had indicated that they didn't believe that the Strickland Road access was necessary and wanted us to remove that from the project. That resulted in an issue with this board and whether or not we complied with the condition of the conditional use standards. The township subsequently amended its ordinance and removed the requirement of the conditional use ordinance of the conditional use standard that you need to have a driveway at the intersecting street so long as you had two driveways associated with the property, which we still do between Route 9 and Wyckoff Mills. So we're back before the board, and we actually now have a DOT permit for our site with the Strickland Road access removed. And we're back before the board for, I'll call it, amended site plan and amended conditional use approval to show the board the changes to the plan that were made as a result of removing the Strickland Road driveway, which honestly were probably for the benefit of the site, where we were able to reduce impervious coverage by an additional 3%, add additional landscaping to the property. So I'm here tonight with our engineer to present that to you. I can say that we reviewed Ms. Newman's letter dated May 27, 2022. We tried to hit all the comments from final. I believe there were some still outstanding. I can stipulate that we take no issue with any of the outstanding comments that are set forth in her letter. And then in addition to that, in addition to the amended site plan, I also just wanted to clarify the delivery the delivery issues that were at a subsequent meeting that unfortunately I had to send my colleague to, who was not as familiar with the application, since it was actually the day after Hurricane Ida and my house had been severely damaged, so I wasn't able to be there. So I want to just, during the course of the testimony, also clarify some of the delivery items that we talked about with the board through the course of the proceeding. So if you have no other further questions for me, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to call Mr. Martell to describe to the board the changes to the plan that were made as a result of the removal of that driveway.
Thank you. Do we need to swear him in, Ron?
Okay, is he on camera?
Yes,
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah, he's there, Ron.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
For the record, Jeffrey Martell, Martell, with the firm of Stonefield Engineering and Design.
Okay, Mr. Tuvell, if you could just qualify the engineer.
Okay. Jeff, can you please provide the board with your educational background, licenses held, and experience testifying before similar boards in the state of New Jersey?
Sure. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Delaware, master's degree from NJIT. I've been practicing in the field for approximately 20 years. I've been qualified as an expert witness before approximately 150 land use boards, and I've been involved with approximately 40 site plan applications involving convenience store and fuel sales.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And you were previously qualified by this board and testified on this application, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask if the board accept Mr. Martell's qualifications.
We will.
Great, thank you. So Jeff, why don't you just get right to it and pull up the proposed site plan and describe to the board the changes that were made as a result of removing the Strickland Road driveway.
Sure. If I may share my screen. Just as literally a 15-second overview, you can mark, I don't know if we want to remark this, but this would be, this was the site plan rendering, essentially.
We have exhibits that are pre-marked. Eileen, what exhibit number is this?
We would be up to A14 based on Eileen's list.
Okay, A14.
So A14 is the previously approved rendered site plan exhibit prepared by Stonefield Engineering, dated 9/1/2021. So this is essentially the site plan that the board acted on in the original preliminary and final major site plan approval. Proposed a 2,999 square foot convenience store, 6 fuel pumps, 25 parking spaces on a 1.4 acre parcel in the HD1 zone. Notably and relevant for this evening, the access to the site was essentially threefold. There was a right in, right out on Route 9 towards the left side of Exhibit A14. To the far right side, there was a driveway proposed on Wyckoff Mills Road, which was restricted in movements as a result of the board's review in the original approval. And then there was a right-in driveway on Strickland Road that was proposed at the time to comply with the conditional use criteria for this use. And this essentially represents the original approval. Now, if I may mark Exhibit A15, this is a rendered site plan prepared by Stonefield Engineering, dated 7/20/2022. This is essentially the site plan colorized with an aerial image under it for the purpose of presentation. And this represents the amended preliminary and final site plan that we're asking the board to consider, with the one notable change that the driveway on Strickland Road has been removed. As Mr. Tubell stated, the DOT pushed back on that driveway for the purposes or for the reasons that Strickland Road has really a limited length between Wyckoff Mills and Route 9. They were concerned with potential customers being tempted to make a left in off of Strickland and really the limited productivity of that driveway. So for reasons that the DOT put forth and the fact that since the original approval, the town ordinance has changed and the requirement to have that driveway is no longer part of the conditional use criteria, we have since removed that driveway from the plan and obtained NJDOT approval. As part of the changes that result in this, we are happy to report there is a reduction of 3% impervious coverage on the property, the ability to provide continuous landscaping along Strickland Road. We no longer have to worry about the driveway in that area, so we can provide a nice continuous visual in the landscaping along Strickland, less stormwater runoff. And in terms of the traffic, what we noted was really a negligible change. There were only 2 peak hour trips anticipated on that Strickland Road driveway, so it really wasn't intended or anticipated to be a productive driveway. So by removal and redistribution of those 2 trips, really doesn't move the needle on any of the traffic findings or analysis. All the level of service at the driveways, at the intersections, all remain the same. And we really don't see any impact to the flow of traffic on or off the property as a result of the change. Things that have stayed the same is essentially the balance of the site. Still 25 parking spaces, there's still 6 fuel pumps. Convenience store is still 2,999 square feet. Driveway on Wyckoff Mills Road is the same. Driveway on Route 9 is the same. And really all the site improvements, sidewalks, loading, etc., are all exactly the same. So the change is really isolated to that portion of the site where the Strickland Road driveway had been removed. And as Mr. Tubell stated, we did receive the review letters, notably the engineering review letter, Environmental Commission, Board of Health, Water and Sewer. We take no objection to complying with all of those review letters.
And Jeff, just one thing that I believe Ms. Newman's letter wanted us to clarify was that the signage as proposed is in conformance with the prior approval, 2 wall signs and the 1 freestanding sign. The canopies, as per the approval, we removed the 7-Eleven signage and just had the striping, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then there was one waiver that was noted in Ms. Newman's letter on page 6. I think as a result of having an EV make-ready station Can you just address that waiver and whether or not we can comply?
Sure. So there is an EV ready area that we are proposing. The parking spaces essentially to the southeast of the site, close to Strickland Road. That is an EV ready area that we're proposing. And we have 2 bollards in front of those potential future EV equipment areas. So what the waiver is that the bollards are essentially protruding into the parking stall depth. And it was really an oversight. So we are not requesting the waiver and would stipulate that we would move the bollards onto the curb or immediately behind the curb, an area that would still protect the future equipment, but would not protrude into the required parking stall depth.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Jeff, that would be a future EV station if 7-Eleven chose to put one in there, because we are under the 25 spaces or under, correct?
Correct. Yeah, not required, but essentially we're planning for the future in the event that one does go in there.
Got it. Okay. And then going to the delivery issue that I discussed, I just wanted to clarify with the board, and I apologize that I was not able to be at that September meeting on final based on personal circumstances. So I just want to confirm what 7-Eleven would like as the delivery restrictions that were discussed, and I'm happy to discuss it with the board. They agree to the overnight restriction on the tractor trailer deliveries. We understood that was a concern of the board. There are specifically 2 deliveries that do occur in the overnight that are critical. One is the fresh food delivery, the dairy, eggs, other things that are there for every morning, as well as newspapers. Those come in box trucks, not in large vehicles. They can park in a regular parking space. And we'd like to be able to make sure that those can come. The rest of the delivery vehicles for the store, we take no issue with the restriction. And then the fuel deliveries are really done on demand based on when fuel gets low. For example, if there's a big rainstorm or a power outage and fuel goes low, it notifies the fuel provider to bring the fuel. However, the fuel does not load in the loading area closer to the residential. It fuels. Jeff, if you could just point out to the board where that would be. Yeah, which is really adjacent to Route 9. Is that correct, Jeff?
Correct.
Okay. So that's what the client would prefer as the restrictions. And I just wanted to clarify that. And again, I apologize that I couldn't be at that meeting back in September. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I believe that concludes our presentation. It was just to come back and explain to the board. And I also want to thank the town and the planning board as well for working with the applicant, on the ordinance change. For the ordinance change, we wouldn't have been able to come back and make this work at the planning board. So, we appreciate that, the town working with us on that issue.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, Brian.
Go ahead.
Jen, the reason why the egress and egress on Wyckoff is our ordinance requires 2 access points?
So initially, the ordinance required access to Route 9 and then access to the street that it's perpendicular to Route 9, which would have been.
Which is Strickland.
Right. So now the change is that there needs to be 2 forms of ingress and egress. They have that on Route 9 and on Wyckoff Mills. So they comply with our ordinance requirements.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to say, because I lived in that area. And it's been raised before. Your egress and egress going on to Wyckoff is right adjacent to an exit from the villages. I would rather give a relief from that.
We can't. Because if they don't have an access, 2 forms of access, we don't have jurisdiction.
Oh, that goes to the zoning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's why, Mr. Nicastro, we in the last application, we made it restricted and it was a right turn out only.
I remember, Brian.
Left turn in and right turn out.
Okay.
The best we could do. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other?
No, and I get what Rob is saying. I get it.
We all get it. I don't think anybody doesn't get it. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll open it up to the public. Eileen, please provide the instructions on how the public can raise their hand and mute and unmute themselves.
At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public that wish to ask questions or comment on the 7-Eleven application. Anyone wishing to do so, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're calling in, you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute yourself. You will be sworn in. You'll be required to have audio and video if you're testifying, and you will need to give your name and address.
Thank you. Now 7:51 in about 15 seconds, so we'll give it about a 30 to 45 second period to allow people to raise their hands and mute and unmute themselves. Eileen, anybody?
I'm not seeing anyone with their hand raised.
Okay. We will close the public portion of the meeting. If anybody else on the board has any final questions or comments they'd like to ask, now is the time to do so. If not, we'll let council summarize and close. Seeing no one asking any questions, Counselor, please close.
All right, now I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Again, I appreciate the township working with us on this based on DOT's response. I think the project actually got better as a result of removal of that driveway with less impervious coverage, more landscaping that made the site look better from an aesthetic and also from a stormwater management standpoint. We've agreed to comply with all the conditions of the prior approval. That all remains in effect, other than which are changed by this, including the restriction on the driveway on Wyckoff Mills that we discussed at length during the prior meetings. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I would respectfully request that you grant the application as proposed with the conditions and representations that we made this evening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. That being said, I'll entertain a motion.
So move, Brian.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Did we lose Mr.
Yes.
Spanville? Oh, thank you.
Ms. Talente,
yes,
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night. That's the last application, right, Eileen?
Yes, it is.
Okay, do we have a master plan update of any sort?
We do quick and dirty. Basically, I've been asked by the township to look into preparing a farmland preservation plan. The town participates in the county's planning incentive grant program, and it's essential that the farmland preservation plan be done periodically. So that's something that we're going to be putting forward to the master plan subcommittee, towards the latter part of this year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Do we have any need to go into executive session?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do for litigation. So if Eileen, if you could read the resolution and then we'll take a vote on it.
Sure.
Mr. Cucchiaro and Eileen, I have to recuse myself from this. I actually coach football with the owner of the property, so I cannot be a part of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Executive session resolution, whereas Title 10, Chapter 4, Section 13 of the New Jersey Revised Statutes requires that the public shall not be excluded from any meetings of a public body unless a resolution authorizing such exclusion is adopted at a public meeting. And whereas the Planning Board of the Township of Howell has determined that such a closed meeting is required to discuss certain matters which are exempted from consideration with the public in attendance under New Jersey Revised Statutes 10:4-12, namely litigation. Now therefore be it resolved by the Planning Board of the Township of Howell that the public shall be excluded from the next portion of this meeting, and that the Planning Board will not reconvene in public session thereafter. Be it further resolved that minutes will be kept of the meeting in closed session, and the time and circumstances under which the discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public cannot be determined at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I need a motion on that.
So moved.
And a
Do I have a
second.
second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser. He excused himself, sorry. Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Okay, before we adjourn to executive, I sent everyone a separate email with the logins for that executive session. So you need to go to your email and use that login. This meeting will end and I will start that meeting and then we'll go to executive.
Thank you.
I need a motion to adjourn to executive.
I make a
So
motion.
moved.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See you in a minute. Thank you.
Aye.